Welcome everyone to our Veeam ONE technical onboarding training session. Today's technical training will focus on the deployment and configuration of Veeam ONE, and we're glad to have you join us today. In a minute, we're going to launch the training hosted by Chris Grady, system engineer here at Veeam, and myself, Ken Fisher, also a system engineer. We're going to walk you through the entire process of Veeam ONE deployment and configuration. Please, make the use out of the training by actively participating and asking questions whenever they come in mind in the Q&A, and we can get those answered for you. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into the training. Let's see. Today we're going to be talking about the introduction of what Veeam ONE is and licensing capabilities. We'll be talking about the architecture, the core components that go along with this, the Veeam ONE client itself, and the Veeam ONE web client. And then we'll also talk about some additional resources. So let's talk about the entire Veeam structure with licensing. So we have Veeam Foundation. This provides essential backup and recovery capabilities. We do have a Veeam onboarding training webinar as well that covers everything in VBR. So if you're interested in that, feel free to ask and we can, get some information over to you. Moving on to Veeam Advanced. This includes additional features such as security integrations with malware detection and scanning, which also then includes Veeam ONE, which obviously we're going to be going over today. And then we have the Veeam Premium, which includes everything I mentioned. On top of that includes also the recovery orchestration product, as well as Coveware Recon Scanner to provide additional threat assessment, which we can provide documentation on if needed. For Veeam ONE, we're going to be focused on v12.3, and this is the current supported platforms we have. So VMware vSphere 6.0 all the way up to 8.0 update 3. You could also use the VMware Cloud Director 10.1 through 10.5. The Hyper-V is 2012 through 2025, and of course Azure Stack HCI. Here are the versions of VBR and VBM 365 you can add to your Veeam ONE environment that you are currently supported with version 12.3, including monitoring and reporting for M365. So we got, all the way down to VBR 10A. Hopefully not a lot of people are on that anymore. Same thing with 11, and then also 12 through 12.3 for the VBR side. And then, of course, the M365 version 7 and version 8 is the supported platform to get your monitoring and reporting out of. Let's talk about the two different licensing models real quick. Our legacy license model was Socket, which was designed primarily for on-prem environments. Licensing is allocated per CPU socket on hosts and only supports VMware and Hyper-V. The instance-based model is the newest format that gives a more flexible approach where you're not tied into on-prem only and you can freely back up other hypervisors that we currently support, as well as cloud workloads, unstructured data, physical servers and workstations, things like that with the instance-based. If you're on a socket-based licensing, you can migrate them to universal licensing as well. Just need to talk to your customer success manager and we can get you information over there if that is something that is interest to you. More about the licensing is the two types of licensing. So you have perpetual license as well as a subscription perpetual. Just subscription itself. Perpetual is a permanent license, and you would continue to pay for support and maintain maintenance on those. The subscription-based type is going to be expiring at the end of your subscription term, so you would have to pay for year over year on that particular subscription-based type of licensing. Let's jump right into the architecture and core components for Veeam ONE, since we've just went over the licensing aspects. All right, so we have the Veeam ONE server, which is a central component that is responsible for data collection. This also provides the functionality of monitoring, alerting, and reporting for your backup infrastructure, as well as your virtual infrastructure. We are storing this data in a database, which you can either install locally or remotely. The purpose of this is for long-term reporting and monitoring. So if you need to check back on something from months ago, let's just use an example. An audit company wants you to show proof of backups for 3 months ago. Utilizing Veeam ONE, you would be, easily be able to go in and pull a report and show proof of backups and or recovery at that time. Since this is a pretty active server, it is recommended to install Veeam ONE on its own server and not on the same server with your current VBR. Let's talk about the Veeam ONE client as well, as the Veeam ONE web client, since they are used for different things. The Veeam ONE client itself is a desktop application that is installed so you are easily able to monitor your infrastructures, as well as get proactive monitoring with alerts in real time, so you're able to act swiftly if any issue arises. The Veeam ONE web client, on the other hand, is a simple to use browser-based interface that also includes some monitoring and dashboards, but can run countless number of reports against the VBR servers as well as their proxies, repositories, and so on. Many people I talk to enjoy the features such as capacity planning for your repositories, so you can plan for future growth of those repositories and the need for potential hardware refreshes. The virtual infrastructure also has a lot of reports you can run, such as orphan snapshots, undersized, oversized VMs, and plenty more. We're just trying to keep the infrastructure as optimized as possible, as well as monitoring and assessment capabilities. There are over currently 150 predefined reports that are included with the Veeam ONE web client. You also have the ability to create some custom reports based on your own configuration parameters. Moving over to the architecture overview and how this workflow happens. Like I mentioned, is we have the Veeam ONE server as well as the MS SQL database. The Veeam ONE server houses the web client as well as the desktop application client. So we have the data collection from the VBR or Enterprise Manager, VBM 365 if you're using that, or a supported hypervisor here. Once the data is collected, you will be able to go into the corresponding web client or Veeam ONE client and review information it is gathered and take advantage of that proactive monitoring and reporting. We also have some other integrations with software such as ServiceNow. You would be able to get some clear visibility by integrating that with Veeam ONE if you're utilizing ServiceNow. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later on. Let's go through the installation process. So hopefully you're familiar with logging into your Veeam account. You'll find Veeam ONE under your product downloads. It's just a simple download the ISO that is attached there. So you can see the picture on the left is logging into the Veeam account. And then once you're in there, you'll be able to click on your name in the top right and go to your product downloads. So that's what it would look like. And you can see on that picture on the right side, we have Veeam ONE. It's 2.4 gigabytes. You would just hit download, and that's all you're going to need to do from that aspect. Once the ISO is downloaded, you'll just mount that and run the setup. The installation process, if you run into an issue or anything, we have a view documentation button down there. Links you right to the user guide. It's just helpful for double checking like system requirements or something if you needed to, as well as if you just need additional steps or anything. It goes through the whole installation process. But here we can see install Veeam ONE or install the Veeam ONE client itself. So we're going to focus on the install Veeam ONE at first. Once we hit install on those, you'll be presented with providing the license file to load into the console, or you can log in with your Veeam credentials to automatically apply the license. When you hit the next button, you'll be presented by providing a service account with admin privileges on this server. So make sure you have the license file handy if you prefer to do it that way, or you can just simply log in. When you've finished that, you will get a summary of the configuration that will be applied. Now, if you like the default settings as like an all-in-one appliance, that works out fine. We do have the customized settings. You can see the components step here. If you do hit customize settings, maybe you just want to install the Veeam ONE server and the client on this server and install the web services on another one. By default, it's all installed on the same. But you do have options to kind of get a little bit granular if needed to. Moving on from the customized settings territory here, if you hit next after the components, it's going to talk about the database. You'll be choosing where you want the database to live. Like I said, by default, it installs it on the new instance of the server itself. You can specify an existing instance or specify a SQL connection that you want to use. For the connect to SQL, we do have a user guide that goes over what permissions are needed for the user that is needed to authenticate. If you choose the all-in-one setup, it's just going to be utilizing the username that you provided at the beginning of the installation process. If we hit next again, you will see the data locations picture over there on the right where you want to store cache as well as the installation path for Veeam ONE if you need to change that for any reason. So not much to go off of there. If we hit next again, this is going to go into the data collection mode. I would recommend using the second or third option as so you just basically assure you're getting everything collected, but you do have the granularity of if you want to just do Veeam backup data only and not do infrastructure or anything like that. I mean, you could set that as a parameter. And then also once we hit next from there, we have the port configuration. These are all the default ports. If you need to change them for any reason, you can go ahead and utilize a different port number. Everything regarding the ports and what they're used for as well are listed in that user guide. So, feel free to take a look at that if needed. And then once we hit next, again, we are at the summary screen again, where we can now install the product after reviewing the changes you've made, if you made any. So once we're hit install, we'll jump over to the Veeam client itself and what the interface looks like. So as soon as you hit launch Veeam ONE, after the installation, you'll see the toolbar in the main menu up here at the top left, where you would go to add a VBR server or an enterprise manager server, as well as your virtual infrastructure. Once they are added, we will see at the inventory pane here, that's going to start filling in with, in this case, the virtual infrastructure. At the very bottom, you can see the VBR and VBM 365, so you can toggle between them all. In the center section here, this is the information pane in the middle. So if you click on anything, it'll start showing you more information to interact with. So, a summary of servers, if you're looking at the infrastructure, the alarms, what objects are included there, as well as performance, top objects, things like that to get in and take a look at, what that host is reporting. And then lastly, over here on the far right side, we have the actions pane. This is where if you have an alert on something and you need to take action against it, whether it's resolving the alarm, acknowledging or excluding, or getting into, more definitions in history management, you could do that as well. Don't worry, we're going to go through this a little bit more. This is just a quick, glance as soon as you log in and see what is staring at you in the face there. So let's jump over to adding a VBR server. So to collect data on your backup infrastructure and data protection operations, you're going to need to establish connections with the Veeam ONE client. So you can connect two types of servers here. You can connect a VBR server. This is for just monitoring standalone backup servers. But then if you're using Enterprise Manager to back up or monitor multiple servers rather, you could add the Enterprise Manager and it will bring in all the VBR servers that the Enterprise Manager is currently managing. So steps to configure this, you would just go into the top left file menu button there and click Add Server. You're going to be seeing the screen here on the right, and we'll just go through adding the VBR server. So you'll click Veeam Backup and Replication. You're going to specify the connection details. You can use DNS name or an IP address of the server itself. Specify if it is a VBR server or an enterprise manager server. And then we're also going to be installing the Veeam ONE agent. So that's going to be to analyze those logs and perform any actions through alarms if you want to take any remedies that you can set up. Once you hit next there, you're going to specify credentials for connecting to that server. So just local administrator permissions are required to install the Veeam ONE agent. So just keep that in mind. Once you hit next from this screen, it will go ahead and test those credentials and let you know if it comes back as an error or if everything was successful. And then once we get into the next screen here, which is just the dashboard, we're going to see all of the information start filling in. So as soon as that server is added, whether it's VBR or Enterprise Manager, it's going to start filling out that inventory pane, and you're going to see things as follows. You're going to see backup job summary. You're going to see repositories, proxies, WAN accelerators, tape servers, cloud repositories, things like that are all going to start filling in so you can get some more information on them. And the information that we're going to be going through is you're going to get like health usage, you're going to get the status, how active your proxies are processing tasks. Each dashboard has a weekly and a monthly view, so you can see them at a quick glance, and just gives you that information on how hard a proxy is working, or how much data is in a repository versus free space. Let's jump over to the dashboards just so you can kind of see what I'm mentioning here. So the Veeam the dashboard's offering a comprehensive view of the backup infrastructure and data protection operations. These dashboards allow to monitor job performance and analyze resource usage and optimize your environment in real time. So the summary dashboard here that you can see is going to give us just a quick overview of job status of the VBR server you've added. If you've added multiple servers, it will report on all of them, as well as the repositories used and which proxies, like I said, are working the hardest. Repository overview. We will go ahead and this is going to show us how many stored VMs and computers live in that repository, as well as how much data and full backups, as well as incrementals. If you're utilizing any unstructured data, application backups, that would all showcase there. So you can kind of just see that at a quick glance, along with giving you some graphs and tooltips. If you highlight them on how much space is used versus free, you can kind of break it up there. You can kind of see the different colors associated. Other things to consider is there is a days left quick summary on these repositories as well. It's just going to give us a rough estimate on how many days are left if everything in the infrastructure stays the same. We're basically analyzing the data change rate and things like that, letting you know if everything stays the same, you'll need to think about upping your storage, or hardware refresh if your days are running kind of low on space there. The proxy overview. This is going to provide us information about what the data is processing, how many tasks, letting you know which proxy is working the most and maybe could be overloaded. So it could be something to consider for maybe you need to spin up another proxy to help offload some of the heavy lifting the server is doing. But in short, it is looking at how much data is being transferred, how many hours it is being utilized, as well as how many disks it is processing. So just, if you only have one proxy, you can kind of get in there and see if it's getting overloaded, if it's working constantly. Might help shift the load by adding additional. Jumping over to the alarms, we have a lot of predefined alarms already. So it helps you to get information immediately once you add your VBR into the Veeam ONE environment. Things that it's going to be monitoring is connectivity issues, monitors the communication between backup and infrastructure components. The software health, it's tracking the state of the VBR servers in general. Obviously, we're looking at job statuses, so you're going to get alerts for any failed or warning jobs. The storage capacity is the kind of the big one there. So if it's rapidly decreasing or you're running low on space, it's going to let you get information on that. And of course, we're monitoring licensing. So um, on the left is an alarm for an example about the licensing. So you can just see it says license key has expired, initiated by Veeam ONE. Just basically all of our alarms are showing you the details. So we're always going to be showing you a description of the alarm. We'll give you knowledge about the alarm and what the cause and a potential resolution is. Sometimes we even link KB articles if it's a known issue. Obviously, this is not a replacement for support. It's just giving you extra guidance if needed. So like I mentioned, we have a lot of predefined alarms to monitor the health and efficiency of the VBR infrastructure. These alarms basically are helping just detect potential issues, prevent disruptions in the data production operations there. So the screen we're looking at here, it's basically telling us if something is in error or a warning status. You'll also get with that, what the time and what the source of that issue is. The name of the alarm, which you can easily highlight the status and get the alarm details. As you can see, this one we have is highlighted, talking about the same thing as before. The license is expired. So we're just letting the alarm details and a quick resolution to handle this. With that being said, the alarm details are like this across the board. We're at least trying to give you some sort of solution, whether it's telling you to try and fix something within VBR or referencing that KB article to a potential fix. Once you've investigated the alarm, you have a handful of actions that you can take. Like I kind of mentioned on the couple slides back, we talked about the actions. If you resolve the alarm, great, just hit resolve and then it's marked resolved so anyone else knows that if they're monitoring this as well. You can acknowledge the alarm. And that's going to be if you do have multiple people monitoring things, you can, and you're the first one in there, put an acknowledged on it so you're not working on the same issue with multiple people. You get in there first, put it as acknowledged so everyone else knows you're looking into it. And then exclude, obviously, that's just for if you don't want that alarm to report on that particular resource anymore. If you want to do some extra customizations, you have the option to edit the alarm to maybe take action with a script if that alarm goes off. And you also have the option to create new alarms if you need something specific. So I like to use the example, I've talked with security admins in the past. They've wanted to monitor services of an important server. So they wanted to know if that service ever got stopped or disabled. So by default, we're not monitoring all of the services on those servers. So you would have to set up a specific alarm for that. But you could specify an alarm, go in, monitor that specific service. If it does get paused, stopped, or disabled, you can just get a quick notification on it. So it works out good in their favor. On the right side, this is what the alarm settings would look like. So you do have the general, the rules, assignments, and obviously notifications. The actions are there as an optional thing. If you want to write a script on, if this alarm goes off, you can remedy a script to run to, resolve that action or whatnot. Let's go through the Veeam Intelligent Diagnostics. So this is basically designed to automatically detect and resolve known configuration and performance issues in your backup infrastructure. And how we're doing that is we're analyzing the logs from the VBR server. It triggers alarms with actionable recommendations, allowing you to basically address potential issues without needing to contact support. The support team pushes updates to Veeam ONE on common issues previously investigated. So you're being kept up to date on resolutions. So if there's a known issue, they may have a KB article on it. So if you get a particular alarm and you look at the resolution, they might already have, done some of that legwork to show you, hey, this is a kind of a common issue, and this is the KB to fix it. So that's always helpful that the Veeam support team is keeping up to date on those resolutions. And then we also have the Veeam ONE agent itself, which you can see there kind of reading back and forth between the VBR server. So that's just basically communicating to Veeam ONE and VBR all the time. It's collecting those logs. It's executing remedies commands if you've set up any in the alarm settings. And then, of course, this performs in two ways. So the server mode is analyzing those logs and managing the signature updates that Veeam support pushes. And then you have the client mode, which is collecting those logs and executing all of those remedy actions on those connected VBR servers if you need to. Just a quick aspect of what a resolution would look like with the support team, linking a KB article, you'll see there at the bottom. Get more information about this, refer to the following KB article. It is obviously a known issue that the support team has worked on in the past, and they have a fix for it. So just kind of the more you know, the resolutions are very handy to have there. Let's jump over to the performance charts on what it would look like if you're monitoring anything regarding like proxies, for instance. Let's just kind of say let's go through a scenario. A company notices nightly backups are taking a long time, more than usual to complete, leading to maybe missed SLAs for your backup window. So Veeam ONE's used to analyze the performance of those backup infrastructure components to pinpoint any potential slowdowns. So by default, we're looking at CPU performance. So obviously, if there's any bottleneck there, if it's spiking to 95 to 100% during backup jobs, indicates proxy server hardware resources, insufficient to handle the workload efficiency, or maybe we need to adjust the concurrent task limits. Maybe we need to add additional proxies, something around those natures. If we're looking at the memory, um, this is analyzing what's happening during those backup hours as well. So we're looking obviously for any high memory usage spikes. And then same thing with disk performance. We're looking at the disk throughput and any anomalies that could be presented during those backup times. And then last but not least is the networking aspect. If there's any high network utilization during backup times, you would be able to see those spikes in those particular hours. Something that's I don't really have documented here is at the bottom right. You can see where it says period, and we're looking at the last hour here. You can adjust that drop down and kind of go through the last day, the last week, the last month, just to get a bigger graph if needed. We'll jump over to the VB365 monitoring. But we're looking about the same as what we're doing with the VBR side, but obviously on the M365 side. So we're looking at, the infrastructure. We're looking at the health of the backups and the repositories. We're monitoring the proxies that are being used. We have the alarms to go with it. We're getting the same performance charts as you just seen, but on the VBM 365 side. And then, of course, we're getting all of our protected data and events and, logging all of those as well. And what the M365 stuff looks like here is similar. We try to keep it universal across the board, so you don't have to keep learning something every single time. So we're looking for jobs with users, groups, sites, teams, as well as, again, we're looking at the repository status. So we're seeing the bottom graph there is the free space, and then of course we also have the proxy overview as well. Let's see, go here, and obviously we can see the summary aspects. So there's always a summary for the last like 7 days, but then there's always a monthly summary as well if you needed to see something at a glance for the last 30 days. And here is the proxy overview again, highlighting the proxies that are utilizing during jobs being processed. We can see how much data is being transferred and their utilization window. In this example, we're not really pushing a lot of transfer data, but You can see obviously the utilization window there on Tuesday was not very long to process that job regardless. So don't want to see those, you know, really high numbers on the utilization, because then we're seeing some type of bottleneck of some sort. The Veeam ONE clients were tracking and monitoring those jobs, so offering real-time statistics, like I said, across various infrastructure levels. One thing to keep in mind here is we have a filter in find jobs. So if you had a huge list here and not just the few jobs that are listed here, you could always filter them by success, error, warnings. You could search for a specific job name, and you can also uh, go ahead and just track the status there on the left side. If you're curious to know what type of repository is being used for those particular jobs, that is all situated there. It's telling you where those backups are actually living. And then we're also looking at the transfer data of that job for that day. For every object in the list, we're following details for the objects. We're seeing what the object is, the email address in this situation. We're seeing when the job ran, what the last status was. We're looking at how many restore points were being utilized. So if there is some type of, let's just say there's 64 restore points on a particular user, but only 30 on another, obviously it could be it's a new user, or maybe it's an inactive user, so we're not backing that one up anymore. Just things to keep in mind on those statuses. And then of course we have the Veeam ONE, where we've provided, all these predefined alarms. So anything to kind of the same thing as the VBR. We're looking at connectivity issues, the software state, any failures or warnings, storage space, if jobs are taking a long time to run versus how much they usually take. And then we're also looking at the product licensing. So in this particular alarm, server connection failure. So the Veeam ONE server couldn't respond. We couldn't report against the M365 server, so it could mean networking, it could mean user account, it could be like a service isn't running. So things to kind of look into. With that being said, I know we're going to be jumping over to the virtual environment monitoring now, and Chris is going to handle this section. So Chris, you can kind of take it away there.
All right, thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. So moving right ahead, here is the virtual event or virtual environment monitoring. So in the protected data section, there are additional hypervisors that we can integrate with. At this time, VMware vSphere and Hyper-V are the infrastructures or hypervisors that we can monitor. And these are kind of the high-level views. We'll go through what that will look like in the interface. But you get dashboard and infrastructure view, which essentially summarizes hosts, VMs, and data stores, performance and network information as well, CPU memory storage, in-guest insights, so you can track processes, services, create alarms or automated actions based on that, alarms and data protection, further alerting and key system events, and top objects and hardware, so you can look at resource usage. So if you're just trying to rebalance resources or load balance, or if you're planning to make infrastructure changes, or if you just want to verify that the hardware is in good shape, um, you can get reports on that. So starting with the dashboard and infrastructure. So you would start off with, this would kind of be like the left pane view from the Veeam ONE client. So the root node would be like where you'd add it essentially. So in this case, we're going to start off with vCenter. And so below you can add resources. So that would include folders, resource pools, hosts, clusters, data centers, or the vCenter appliance or server. So within the infrastructure view, this is kind of like where you would land if you were to click the virtual infrastructure on the left pane of Veeam ONE. So this would be like looking at an individual host within there. So you'll see like a quick pie chart summary on data stores that are healthy, warning error or inaccessible if there is any. An overview of resource usage, the amount of alarms per object if there are any, and then the most recent alarms that are errors or warnings. And anything that is blue kind of suggests that it's a hyperlink that you can kind of click to that exact instance of that alarm. So this is like if you were to click into an individual VM, similar view, but within the context of a VM. So this would be looking at the CPU memory usage for that machine itself, disk usage, health status, and if it's linked to any business view groups, which we'll discuss a little bit later, that will also be shown on the bottom right. And then of course, data stores, similar view here. You can see alarms specific to the data store, latency, the last hour, or the current reading of it, storage usage, and the machine states associated with that data store. So just kind of reviewing what we just looked at. So you can select any infrastructure object on the left side of the inventory pane to view the relevant charts, or if you wanted to, dashboard or charts. And so that would include the CPU and memory, network, data store, disks, and so on. You can customize tailored charts for specific needs and insights, and it just depends what you're looking for there or the time intervals. So performance charts. So kind of going into the resources that we discussed earlier, and if you select the performance section, so this would be the overview of kind of a quick glance at all of the different resources. You can click into individual resources, and so kind of the most of the things that you would change in here, if you were to change anything, would be like where it says chart options, chart views, or period. Um, the chart views for CPU would basically just be the frequency of cycles or the percentage of CPU used. For other metrics, there will be additional chart views. Period will pretty much be the same for all of them. It's just the amount of time that you're trying to get a view of. So it would really depend on if you're trying to look at something from last night or something that's happening now or the last hour, whatever the case may be. If it's more granular type of info you're trying to get, a report would probably be a better use case. But this is more of like a quick view version. So memory, similar concept. You do have more chart views here, depending on the hypervisor. And yeah, it's pretty much the same aside from that. Network, a lot more chart views. And you can see like the receive rate, transmit rate, usage, and on each NIC. That's why it's kind of doubled or more if you have more than two. So here are alarms within vSphere. So you can view the triggered alarms, view the history, or the repeat count would be kind of like track the history. Resolve and acknowledge and perform either remediation or forwarding to some of our other integrations that we will discuss a little bit later. So here's an example of one alarm. So this would be, you can customize this. There is a default threshold. So it's like over a certain amount of time period, if the average amount of memory is above the threshold, which is 90, then that will be triggered. So that one's pretty straightforward, but some of them you'd probably want to read the cause and the resolution and go from there. And so here's another example. This would be like a ESX level storage connectivity issue. So that's what that event kind of suggests there. It tells you the path to the HBA for that. If it's able to determine the affected data stores, it will list that. If not, you could probably find that somewhere else. And it'll give you some, the knowledge and causes, depending on the exact alarm, can give you some places to look if you're like totally lost on what could cause this. And resolution for this one, it looks pretty helpful. Depending on the alarm, you'll get different suggestions, but that's pretty good for that one. So ingest processes and services. So this would be like if you're looking at an individual VM, if you can authenticate into the VM, you can look at basically running services and processes. So in this case, you can start, stop, restart, or create alarms to monitor behavior of services and processes. And see a similar concept there: create alarm, disconnect, or to kill the process. Or if it is not running, you can start it. Additionally, on the right image, which from the context of the application would be on the left side, if you were to choose an individual VM, you can also do remote management, which allows you to power it off, reboot it, power it on if it's already off, or hard reset if you must, or shut down guest host would probably be the way. And then business view. So I alluded to that earlier. So it is a way to abstract different resources that may not be directly connected from the physical host or whatever the case may be. So it basically allows you to two different perspectives for viewing the infrastructure. So that would be like technical perspective or business perspective, or I mean, there's probably going to be overlap between the two. So yeah, so the category would be like department or purpose, and the groups would be like the specific example of whatever the category is. So if it's department in that case, IT, sales, support, or in the other case, maybe purpose, you could define it as just different workloads, or maybe, well, let's just keep it at that. Yeah. So file servers and web. So categories can be created statically or automatically generated based on certain criteria. Um, the objects within them can include clusters, hosts, VM, data stores, applications, and you can have objects within multiple groups if that is necessary. Um, and so, yeah, the groups I kind of mentioned are just specific instances of categories. So once you've created one of those, like a category in the groups, you can essentially use those as a source for alarms, dashboards. Essentially, you can use that as if it was its own entity. So you can monitor the overall state of the categorized infrastructure, view trigger alarms, view objects in the categories and groups, work with performance charts, view list of events, create alarms based on that, and so on. Um, so this would be if you were to click into an example of a business view group, similar to other dashboards that we viewed earlier, but instead of looking at like, individual host or cluster or something like, or VM or something like that, this would be that abstracted group that you created. And so, yeah, just alarms. This would be kind of like the summary. So it's showing the most recent alarms, alarms by object. But again, the context here is for the business view group or category that you've created. So it's just kind of custom views of certain groups of workloads. So ServiceNow integrations and more, but most of this image in the center will be, well, it's completely related to the ServiceNow integration. And there is a QR code at the top right if you wanted to read more about that. So if you use ServiceNow in your environment, so just kind of working from the left to the right. So on the left side would be like the workloads that Veeam is protecting, and through the various applications that would be appropriate for that. The data or the results of those backups is then fed into Veeam ONE. And based on what you want to create alarms or ServiceNow cases, you can then forward that to ServiceNow, and then you'd have all the tools accessible from that application from there. And it is bi-directional, so if the issue is resolved and you close the case, it will be resolved in Veeam ONE or vice versa. And also on the bottom, you'll notice that Veeam can forward alerts and incident APIs and basically anything you can track within Veeam ONE. It can forward to syslog, which can then forward to any other of those similar tools that we don't officially integrate with. But if you look at the logos above, those are applications that if you have Veeam ONE Advanced or Premium, there should be a Veeam app within those applications app store, so to speak. So those ones have direct integrations. Otherwise, you can forward those events to syslog, which can then forward to like an Azure Sentinel or something like that. All right. So far we've discussed the Veeam ONE desktop client. So this will be more focused on the Veeam ONE web client. So Threat Center is basically similar to the dashboard view, but more security focused. So it provides data platform scorecards, best practices, RPO, immutability, the data protection status, and so on. You'd probably want all those to be 100. Just gives you a quick view to make sure that nothing stands out, assuming the data has been collected recently. So RPO anomalies would be based on the RPO that you set that it's expecting. Anything that exceeds that time will show up here, or if it's not able to determine, like, or if it's never been backed up. So those would be places to look on, like, if you notice your data protection status is rather low, you probably would see some RPO anomalies. Malware detections, if you assign the location and you're using the VBR malware detection features, um, you can essentially get like a geographical view on where those workloads are and what the number of infections based on that. And you can cross-reference that to VBR and Veeam ONE to investigate from there. And then the SLA is based on the RPO, so you'd want that to be mostly green, ideally. And so Veeam Intelligence is essentially our Veeam AI, perfect companion for receiving real-time recommendations and answers to technical questions. So it's pulling data from our official knowledge bases and documentation, as well as Veeam ONE database that's specific to your environment. So that's pretty helpful. Um, Kind of the requirements for that to function properly, it would need at least from the Veeam ONE server, and if you're accessing from the web browser, you'd need internet access out over port 443 to reach out to the REST API or REST AI API and the content delivery and so forth. If that's really the only requirement, and then there is like an accept button from the web client that you have to click, and then from there on the right side, that's kind of what that the Veeam Intelligence from the web app would look like. So at the very top, that's kind of what was typed in. So it's, give instructions based on docs. You wouldn't have to type it like this, and sometimes you can type it different ways if you're not getting the exact response. But um, that's pretty helpful because I would say that's better than just Googling something because it's pulling from our official reports. Of course, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us or request a health check or open a support case. But sometimes that's faster. All right, so Veeam ONE Web Client dashboards. So it contains both predefined and user-defined dashboards. If you wanted to add one, you can click that green plus arrow button and new dashboard, or you can edit existing dashboards. So the first one we're going to look at is the top left one, the Veeam Backup and Replication dashboard. And so these are like, let's see, so essentially, it will kind of give you a high-level view. These are like simplified versions of reports, and that will make a little bit more sense later. Um, so this is kind of like where you, aside from the Threat Center more security-focused view, this is kind of just an at-a-glance view of the web app version of Veeam ONE. So if you look at like your infrastructure, it's kind of just giving you an idea of the health of your different infrastructure components. So if everything looks green, then that's probably okay. If something is red, then especially if it's like a backup server or something like that, then that would probably require some attention. Backup windows, that's a pretty helpful one just to kind of see the differential between the days and maybe look at why that is. Um, Top repositories by use space is a pretty helpful one. You can also see like the trend of the storage usage. That's kind of what those areas represent. So this is a similar dashboard. This is instead of VBR, this is looking at Veeam Backup for M365. So just looking at top jobs by duration, and again, you can create new widgets, and I think we'll show that a little bit later, but these are kind of the default ones. And that icon at the top right of each individual widget would allow you to customize those a little bit. But the more, like if you wanted to do more granular customization, you'd probably end up looking at the reports. But this is, they can be customized a bit for a quick glance view. So this is another dashboard. It is the vSphere hosts and cluster dashboard. So you're just kind of looking at a lot of the same info we looked at the Veeam ONE client, but this is from the web client, and it just gives you a more visual friendly view. And again, you can also adjust these based on what your specific requirements may be. So yes, you can create new dashboards, define widgets, schedule them to be delivered, stored. That's a pretty helpful one through direct links. You can share out a link to just an individual dashboard or widget, and upon request or something like that if you wanted to. So this is kind of if you were to add a widget. So those are actual on like the protected VMs overview. That is the name of an actual report, but the preview is kind of what you would see as the dashboard widget version. So you can kind of, as you're adding them, you can see what it would look like. So that's kind of what that is. And then you can set your scope for, like, so we chose the protected VMs, and you may only, if there's things within your virtual infrastructure, there usually is that maybe you're not protecting with Veeam, you can exclude them here so you're not getting false positives or just, false alarms. So now we're at reports. So predefined reports can be browsed from the templates or searched. So there are hundreds of them. If there's like a word or two that you want to try to narrow it down by, I'd probably just type that in the search bar where it says name. There are like categories on the left side if you kind of have an idea of what you're looking for, that might limit it a bit. You can create your own as well based on any object or property that Veeam can collect data on. But most of the, there are a lot predefined, so it's probably best to see if that already exists. But you can create custom reports certainly. So this is one of the predefined ones, protected VMs or workload protection history if you're more focused on entire workloads being protected by Veeam aside, like not just VMs. But in this context, it is just VMs. So you use similar to the dashboard scope. So let's just say you want to view the entire virtual infrastructure for this one. So since this report is protected VMs, you would want to set your RPO. So you're kind of saying like whatever you put there is, if it hasn't been backed up or protected within that period of time, it will be considered unprotected. So you probably, that should match your RPO policy, or at least yeah, basically policy. And if you want to limit certain job types or exclude certain jobs, you can do that as well. But this will be basically looking at the entire virtual infrastructure, every type of job for anything that hasn't been backed up in the last 24 hours, it will consider unprotected. So it can also be used for checking compliance and security best practices. So backup security and compliance is, the security and compliance analyzer is a feature within Veeam Backup and Replication, which scans for a lot of different things within the Veeam environment or within the Windows Server environment that Veeam is running on, as well as the Veeam product config itself. Um, you probably, or I would definitely check that out if you haven't seen that in Veeam Backup Replication, but you can run reports on it from here just to make sure that, you know, a change wasn't made that makes you not compliant or something like that. You'd probably want to know about that as soon as possible. So that's what this alarm can do, or the report can do. And you can schedule it so you'd be alerted if something happened. So this is kind of what that would look like. Just an example in this case, but and so this is another report. This is latest job status. So this is just basically the status for the last, well, for more jobs than that. It depends on what they put in the parameters of this report. But the first page essentially shows the top 10 jobs by duration and the status of those jobs. And as you go through the report, it will show basically, it'll break it down by different sections, but jobs with warning, successful jobs, and as you go further through, it should show individual jobs and the relevant info related to that. So scheduling, and you can schedule dashboards that we discussed, reports or report folders. So once you've customized, well, either created it with the parameters that you will ultimately use, or created a custom dashboard report, then you can schedule it to be sent to whoever you want or saved to a network folder on a regular basis. So you choose how often you want to do whatever you're about to select under the delivery method. Most people send email, but you could save to a folder as well. And you would just need to have the SMTP server settings configured from the Veeam ONE desktop app for that to be able to send. And if you did want to save the dashboard or report, then you could put the path to where you want to save it. And that could be locally or somewhere on the network. So jobs calendar, this kind of gives users the ability to have an overview of all the jobs processed by the VBR server. So it kind of just gives you an idea of if you're trying to troubleshoot something. There's a lot of different reasons you might want to look at this. If you're adding new things or adding a new job or maybe implementing replication and you want to see when the biggest opening in terms of backup windows would be, or maybe you're troubleshooting a bottleneck and you're trying to see what's running at the same time. This gives you a good visual of that. So deployment projects. Deployment projects allows you to check current capabilities and modify virtual environment by simulating different scenarios. So that would be like either adjusting resources on an existing VM, deploying a new VM based on certain thresholds, and then simulating that uh, on that particular host that you choose and making sure that it passes. So you can aim it at a host or a cluster, and then you can choose data stores depending on what you're trying to simulate. You probably would want to choose one just to make it more accurate with the simulation on whether you pass or fail or not. Because the idea is here is that you're trying, like if you're making a deployment change in your actual environment, you may like technically have enough resources, but you want to make sure that it runs well like that. That's kind of where this comes into play. So you can choose basically like the resources for like, so this is assuming that you'd be adding a new VM to this deployment scenario. So you choose the resources you want for it. Um, and then, yeah, then you set your thresholds or the ideal thresholds, I guess. And then this would be like what you'd see as the result for that as a report. So in this case, it passed. So it is able to simulate like through the simulation, which is using API calls to the ESXi host. So it should be pretty accurate. So it's basically saying within the thresholds you set and the resources you set, that machine should run without issue. All right. So the REST API. So Veeam ONE exposes its entities or essentially any data point that it can collect through an application programming interface, and it's based on the REST API architecture style. So it allows you to do a lot of things, helps you with automation of backup management, monitoring and alerts, automated reporting, third-party integrations, like if you wanted to pull data out of Veeam ONE and import it into like a visualization dashboard like Grafana, you can do that if that's something that you're familiar with. Or if you wanted to automate jobs and stuff like that, you can do that as well. So if you're trying to look at the different objects that you can essentially use within the REST API in Veeam ONE, the Swagger interface within the Veeam ONE web client is where you would kind of explore that and check out what it can do. It does use the client server model if you were wanting to run this programmatically though. So the configuration of the Veeam ONE web client. So that is usually something that you would do when you're first configuring Veeam ONE or making a change to it. So users can review configured connections, change the data collection, and schedule run data collection. So data collection is something that you will definitely want to run on a scheduled basis. It's basically how often it's pulling data from the related components below the object name. So if you're trying to do something in Veeam ONE or maybe even Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, you would maybe just start it manually to if you didn't feel like waiting, or you would maybe just look at the schedule. Otherwise, this would, unless you had an error or something, it should be running on a schedule by default, I believe, once you add the objects. So if you do have an error or if you're adding it for the first time, event logs kind of shows you what's going on with each refresh or the initial add. So if ideally it's all successful, but if you do have a warning or an error, you can click the blue hyperlink and it will show more info on what the cause of that is. So reports, so we looked at some of the reports. If you wanted to customize it, you can add a header image and upload that, and that will just basically be at the top of each report. Or if you wanted to integrate that to SSRS, you can put the URL to that as well and the authentication, and you can test it and then save it. And that is an option. So login session settings is mostly like timeout or max concurrent logins per user. Um, so the timeout, that's probably good to set. And then depending on how you use your logins, if they're service accounts or unique logins, you may or may not want to configure a max number of concurrent logins. And, the Veeam Intelligence, the only thing really there is just clicking accept if you do accept. So additional resources. So this is the hands-on lab. These change over time. So if there's something, I guess all I'm saying is you look at it periodically if that's of interest to you, so that what you see in it today may not be what it looks like in a few months. That is the hyperlink there in green, or if you want to scan that with your QR code, whichever you prefer, it should open the same link. So that is basically just essentially a web app simulation of different features, and it gives you like really good instructions on essentially doing whatever the task is for that particular lab. So it's a good way to learn features in a like guided manner without having to risk installing it in your environment without fully knowing what you're doing yet. And of course, you can always like request a Veeam engineer or open a support case if you have issues. But this is more just uh, for your own learning, or however you want to use it. Um, so certifications, the VMCE and VMCA. So you can do in-person instructor or on demand for the class beforehand, which is required to take the official test. It's available in 100 countries. It is an industry recognized certification. It does cover theory and labs, and that hyperlink below should provide some more information. And then depending on which certification we're talking about, those are the two URLs that will kind of give you an overview of the course outline for those two certifications. And so additional resources, the Veeam calculator is always helpful regardless of which application we're talking about. Kind of same goes for the Help Center documentation. That will just take you to all of our products documentation. You can, in this case, select Veeam ONE. Similar for Veeam Best Practice Guide, that is all of them, but you can get to the Veeam ONE database sizing tool from there. And then the knowledge base, R&D forums, community forums, all great resources. I think the Veeam ONE database sizing guide is the only Veeam specific or Veeam ONE specific resource here, but those are all definitely worth mentioning, I would say. And if you got a success story and want to share it, feel free to reach out at the email below, advocacy@veeam.com. With VeeamONE coming up, who knows? And that's pretty much it. We do have a fair bit of time, so we can answer some Q&A if there's any questions. I can't see at this moment, but let's see. Okay, doesn't. Okay, I think we are good on that front. So thank you for your time today, everybody. Have a great one.